Welcome to Part 2 of the Crusade series, the War for the Holy Land on History Decoded Official. In this episode, we will delve deep into the fierce developments of the First Crusade, explore the birth of the Crusader States in the Middle East, and the reason why the flames of war were never extinguished, only to flare up violently in the Second Crusade. This is a content series selected and summarized by History Decoded Official from the most important historical records, aiming to bring you a clear, concise yet dramatic perspective on one of the bloodiest and most profoundly world-shaping periods. If you love history, war, and the turning points that changed entire civilizations, join us as we continue this journey. Part 2 begins right now. Nicaea and the Prelude of Destiny. In late May 1097, beneath the walls of Nicaea, the proud capital of the Seljuks, the Crusader army and the Byzantine Empire appeared like a threatening specter. After days of suffocating siege on June 19th, Nicaea submitted. But that glory was not for the Western Knights. The city was handed back to the Byzantines to the astonishment of the conquerors. On June 26, they turned their backs on Nicaea to embark on a journey with no retreat. Before them lay Anatolia, a land of nightmares. It was a place where scorching heat and rugged mountains became a test of fate, where the boundary between life and death was as thin as a breath. Dorylaeum, when valor speaks. On July 1st, 1097, at Dorylaeum, the Grim Reaper truly smiled. The vanguard was trapped in a rain of arrows and the burning sun of the Turks. But at the edge of the abyss, resilience created a miracle. When the main army arrived in time for the rescue, the Turkish forces were scattered. It was not merely a military victory, it was a rare moment when the faith, strategy, and bravery of people from different origins merged as one, shattering all doubts. Edessa and the First Shield. While the main army struggled to cross the Taurus Range to reach Antioch, another historical turning point occurred. Baldwin, Godfrey's brother, broke away from the group, plunging into the political vortex of Armenia. With cunning and acumen, he became the ruler of Edessa. This marked the birth of the county of Edessa, the first Crusader state in the east. It was not only a trophy of war, but also a steel shield guarding Antioch from raids from the northeast. Antioch, the jewel between life and death. In October 1097, they reached the gates of Antioch, the ancient patriarchate, the jewel of the Levant with 400 looming watchtowers. The siege dragged on in exhaustion. Famine, plague, and death surrounded them. The situation was so desperate that even Peter the Hermit, the spiritual icon of the war, sought to desert. More tragic was the fracture of trust. When Stephen of Blois convinced Emperor Alexius that Antioch was lost, the emperor withdrew his troops. This diplomatic error tore apart the Old Covenant. From here, religious ideals began to be overshadowed by ambitions for land and personal glory. The bloody reversal and the Holy Lance. On the night of June 3rd, 1098, while the city slept, Bohemond, the strategic Norman lord, made a historic gamble. Thanks to an insider, he threw open the city gates. The Crusaders flooded in like a flash flood, wiping away the complacency of the defenders. But joy was short-lived. Just days later, a massive Muslim army under Kerboga arrived, counter-besieging the Crusaders inside the very citadel they had just captured. Amidst absolute despair, a priest claimed to find the Holy Lance, the weapon that pierced Jesus' side. Whether a miracle or a staged script, it ignited an iron will. On June 28th, the Crusaders charged out with the spirit of those with nothing left to lose, crushing Kerboga's army and forcing the final fortress to surrender. An end or a new beginning? Antioch belonged to the Christians, but the price paid was too high. Plague took Bishop Outremer, the soul of the expedition. The leaders turned to infighting. Bohemond wanted to claim it for himself, while Raymond wanted to return it to the Byzantines. Finally, the common soldiers, those who had bled the most, grew furious and forced the lords to continue the journey to Jerusalem. On January 13, 1099, the main army departed under the shadow of Raymond's banner. Bohemond stayed behind, defying his oath, officially laying the foundation for the Principality of Antioch. The journey from Constantinople to Antioch concluded, leaving behind a new map of power in the East, where personal ambitions had forever altered the flow of history. Jerusalem 1099, glory amidst tragedy, the unexpected enemy and the paradox of history. After a journey of 10,000 miles, upon approaching Beirut, the Crusader army was shocked to realize an ironic truth. Their enemy was no longer the Seljuk Turks. Jerusalem had now fallen into the hands of the Fatimid dynasty from Egypt, Shia Muslims who were sworn enemies of the Sunni Turks. In the chaotic vortex of divided Islamic powers, the Crusaders suddenly became strangers intervening in an Eastern civil war. They advanced toward the Holy Land not only with swords in hand, but also carrying a thirst for salvation after 3 years of experiencing hell on earth. Beneath the walls of destiny, on June 7, 1099, a tragic scene unfolded. The once proud Crusader army was now reduced to a handful of remnants, about 500 cavalry and 12,000 ragged infantry standing before the magnificent walls of Jerusalem. Inside, the Fatimid governor was confident with massive food stockpiles, leisurely awaiting a relief army from Egypt to crush the exhausted expeditioners. Amidst thirst and deprivation, fate smiled when 6 supply ships managed to dock at Jaffa just before the Egyptian naval blockade tightened. That was the final ray of hope for the Westerners. The call from the Mount of Olives. On July 8th, an earth-shaking spiritual event took place. While the Muslim defenders on the walls mocked them, the entire Crusader army, led by the clergy, performed a great fast, marching in a prayer procession around the city before heading straight up the Mount of Olives. Here, Peter the Hermit appeared once again. With the fiery voice that had once urged tens of thousands to leave their homelands, he preached sacrifice and atonement. In that moment, Jerusalem was no longer a military objective. It became the supreme symbol of faith, the only place that could cleanse all their sins. Firestorm, and the collapse. On the night of the 13th, breaking into the dawn of July 14th, the giant siege towers began to move. Roaring shouts mingled with the sound of arrows tearing through the silent air like rain. By July 15th, 1099, the historical turning point arrived. Godfrey's troops captured a section of the wall. Ladders were thrown up, gates were smashed. Tancred and Raymond led the shock troops, flooding in like an unstoppable tide. The Muslim governor surrendered in the Tower of David and was allowed to leave under a pact of honor. But that was the only act of mercy on that day, the blood-red sunset. Jerusalem had fallen, but glory was dyed in the red color of tragedy. Although Tancred had promised to protect those sheltering at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the fanaticism and resentment accumulated over 3 years erupted into an uncontrolled massacre. Men, women, children, both Muslims and Jews, fell within the very holiest of places. It was a victory that history cannot write with glory alone. In the blood-red sunset, one sees a tear-stained laurel wreath upon the victor's head. A miracle or cruelty? 3 long years, overcoming rugged mountains, scorching deserts, and internal divisions, the Crusaders had done the unthinkable. Conquered the 2 most fortified strongholds in the world, Antioch and Jerusalem. From a modern perspective, this was an absurd campaign, disorganized and riddled with logistical errors. However, to the medieval people, it was a miracle of God. The belief that they were instruments of the Almighty turned ragged knights into conquerors. It was this ironclad faith that would continue to fuel lingering wars, reshaping the entire flow of history for the two continents of Eurasia forever after. The Crusader States, the rise and the counterstrike. A lightning-fast attack, a resounding victory against the Egyptian reinforcements officially cemented the Crusader army's control over the entire land of Palestine. The pilgrimage vow was fulfilled. Most knights turned their horses back toward their homeland, leaving behind the captured citadels and a great question hanging in the desert. Who will rule this land? Now Jerusalem belonged to the Christians, but governing a land so sacred and complex was never a simple matter. From the very first days, internal divisions ran deep. One faction believed the holy city must be a pure symbol of faith, placed under the absolute administration of the church. But the warrior nobility, those who had bled for every inch of soil, viewed this as their deserved reward. They needed a secular state, a monarchy to defend the territory with sword and spear, the birth of the kingdom. Finally, a compromise was reached. Godfrey of Bouillon, the most respected and exemplary leader, was elected as the head. But with utmost humility, he refused the title of king. Instead, he called himself the defender of the Holy Sepulchre, bowing before the supreme sanctity of Jerusalem. Although power had a master, the framework of government remained fragile. It was in these precarious years that the Kingdom of Jerusalem was conceived, a lonely Christian fortress amidst a vast Muslim ocean, opening a chapter full of ambition, bloodshed, and calculation. In December 1099, Bohemond of Antioch and Baldwin of Edessa arrived in Jerusalem to complete their vows. Accompanying them was Daimbert, Archbishop of Pisa. Daimbert quickly seized religious power, becoming the Patriarch of Jerusalem with the ambition of turning this place into a miniature Vatican, where the Church held supreme authority. But that theocratic dream soon faded. The establishment of monarchy. Immediately after Godfrey's death, the nobility and the people summoned Baldwin back from Edessa. On November 11th, 1100, Baldwin III was officially crowned. No longer hesitant, Jerusalem officially became a European-style feudal kingdom. The First Crusade concluded not with religious purification, but with the birth of a secular state, with a king, with lords, and with plots interwoven between faith and power. But that was only the prelude. Jerusalem would never know peace, territorial expansion. To survive, the fledgling kingdom was forced to expand. Although the Crusade of 1101 ended in disaster at the hands of the Turks, King Baldwin III shrewdly exploited the divisions among Muslim warlords to expand his territory. He received valuable support from European fleets. Most notably in 1110, King Sigurd of Norway personally led a Nordic fleet to aid the battle. Thanks to this, the port cities of Arsuf, Caesarea, Acre, Beirut, and Sidon fell one by one. By 1112, the entire Levantine coast, spanning modern-day Israel, Lebanon, and Syria, except for Ascalon and Tyre, was in Latin hands. Jerusalem escaped isolation, becoming a maritime power closely connected to Europe through the Silk Roads of the sea, the geopolitical map of Outremer. At this time, the Crusader map of power, collectively known as Outremer, was defined by four pieces: the county of Edessa, the Principality of Antioch, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and the county of Tripoli. 1. First is the county of Edessa, the earliest born, located deep inland, now Turkey, ruling over a predominantly Armenian population. Edessa was like a lonely outpost, a shield guarding the north but also the most vulnerable stepping stone. 2. Second is the Principality of Antioch, where east-west conflicts exploded. The lords here, typically Bohemond and later Tancred, constantly clashed with both Muslims and the Byzantine Empire, turning Antioch into a thorn in diplomatic relations. 3. Third is the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the center of power and faith. 4. And finally, the county of Tripoli. The last piece completed in 1109 after the prolonged siege by Raymond of Saint-Gilles. These 4 states formed a narrow coastal strip sandwiched between mountains and the Syrian desert. On the other side of the desert were the Muslim giants, Aleppo, Homs, and Damascus. To survive, the Franks could not advance deeper east. They chose to build impregnable strongholds. Crac des Chevaliers and Crac de Montréal rose up, stone monsters challenging time, symbols of the Western will to defend in the east. The Rise of Zangi. Times changed. After the era of Baldwin the Barman II, the throne of Jerusalem passed to Fulk of Anjou. He chose a policy of border stability rather than expansion. It was a wise decision, for on the other side of the battle line a nightmare was rising. He was Zangi, the governor of Mosul. Unlike the fragmented Muslim warlords before him, Zangi carried the ambition to unify the Islamic world and the burning flame of jihad, holy war. In the face of Zangi's power, an unthinkable scenario occurred. The Muslims of Damascus, fearing being swallowed by Zangi, allied with the Christians of Jerusalem. Pragmatism reigned supreme. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. But Zangi was a patient wolf. While Jerusalem was busy fortifying the south, Zangi saw the fatal weakness in the north, till the fall of Edessa. In 1144, seizing the opportunity, Zangi launched a devastating attack on Edessa, the weakest link in the Crusader defense system. In just a few days, Edessa collapsed. The first Crusader state to be established now became the first state to be wiped off the map. This news rang out like a death knell, reaching all the way to Paris and Rome. This shock awakened Europe. The Crusade fever flared up once again, but this time, it would not be nameless knights. The most powerful kings of Europe would personally take up swords and set forth. The Second Crusade was about to begin, filled with delusional glories and painful tragedies. That was part 2 of the Crusades History series. Content produced by History Decoded Official. See you in part 3. Sinayan Mun, when kings go to war.